Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Today we have two guests. One is Belle Liang, and the other one is Tim Klein. Belle is a professor and chair of the Department of Counseling, Development, and Educational Psychology in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development at Boston College. And Tim is an award-winning urban educator as well as clinical therapist and a school counselor. And today we're here to talk about their book, How to Navigate Life, the new science of finding your way in school, career, and beyond. Belle and Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, really excited.
So I was reading about your biography, both of you, and it's just so weird how your life came together from such different backgrounds, different mentalities, different ways of seeing the world, and finally working together in a book that is guiding all of us in a similar or it's giving us a light of which path to follow in our life. So being that your paths are so different, Belle, maybe we can start with you, and can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thank you, so, first of all, for that introduction. So my background is I came from an immigrant family myself, and my family immigrated from China to Taiwan to the U.S. Higher ed was always very important in our family. You know, we really believed in the education meritocracy, that if you worked really hard, you could achieve anything. And so I spent most of my school and early career life really trying to make good on my parents' sacrifices, and ultimately, you know, to give back by coming into the education system as a professor and as a researcher. So that was my roots, and I can share more later about how I met the amazing Tim Klein, but I can let him share as well.
Okay, so we will talk about meritocracy in a minute. So Tim, how about you? Can you tell us about, where do you come from? How do you stumble upon education?
Yeah, I mean, my parents valued it, but not that much. I mean, not like they weren't going to force it on me. So I was very much like, instead of like, oh, you have to do college, you have to do all these things. I grew up with parents who were very much just like trusting me to figure it out. And I honestly never took school that seriously when I was younger. I mean, I did everything I was supposed to, but I was kind of just like cruising through life, all the way up until, I really started working in a Boys and Girls Club in Chicago, where I was like, opened my eyes to some systemic inequities. And then, I didn't come into education knowingly. I came in very, very late but I came in with a strong conviction about what I wanted to do in education, which makes Belle and I really, like, as you mentioned, a really, really funny partnership because, Belle is this amazing academic, all-star academia. I very much was not that at all, but it's been this like really, really special partnership that we have coming from two very different places.
So Bill, I think lately there has been kind of a backlash or pushback against meritocracy. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about the educational system and meritocracy, and then what is the pushback against it?
Yeah, I think that there's so many reasons for the pushback that even as a professor of 25 years, I really get and I understand, the cost of higher education is skyrocketing. It's, very much an opportunity for people who have more privileges than not. And I think a lot of families worry whether or not they can actually make good on that investment. Wondering whether or not those that all that hard work and all of those financial resources will really lead to their kids having the kinds of jobs that will be able to make that investment good, and also to be able to follow their dream, to experience the happiness and success that these families hope for their kids.
Okay, I do have a pushback against meritocracy as well, and it is from the lens of entrepreneurship. If today I see some of the most successful entrepreneurs, we noticed that they are not necessarily the best students. Not all of them went to the best schools, and somehow I guess their creativity and their drive to succeed or to invent or create something new brought them to where they are today. So I also have my doubts of in meritocracy, maybe from different point of views. And then there is also the issue of systemic inequality, which Tim knows a little bit more about. Uh, Tim, can you tell us what are some of those inequalities?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you're bringing up this really great point where, I think people are pushing back against higher education right now because there's been this narrative that the value of college is the name brand recognition that you go to Boston College or Harvard or Yale or wherever you're going because you're going to get that name brand, you're going to get associated with Harvard, and just because you went to Harvard, that's going to do a lot of things for you. And in the book, we call that brand capital. And why that it is important, brand capital. I mean, people do have positive associations with those places, but we actually show that the value of higher education is not in that name brand reputation. It's really in the social capital and the human capital that you go. So if you go to any college, you can tap into this social network that has information, opportunities, resources that wasn't available to you. And so like we have these stories of these entrepreneurs, right, who drop out of college, the Elon Musk, the Bill Gates, all these people are dropping, Mark Zuckerberg, dropping out of college, right? And the narrative is, oh, they must have not needed college to be successful. When in reality, they went to those places, they tapped into the social network, they tapped into those people there, and they leveraged them to start the organizations. And so I think the inequity piece is that we're so obsessed in higher education on selectivity, rejectivity, trying to deny it to as many people as possible. And the irony is that if you come from a high socioeconomic status, you have a lot of resources, you already have great social networks. You actually already have a lot of that. And the people who need that higher education the most, the low income, the marginalized, they typically don't have that social network already. And the research is very clear that when they have access to that higher education, that they really, social mobility goes up, all that goes up. So it really comes from this fundamental understanding about what the true purpose of higher education is.
Okay, and what are your ideas in all these, for example, Google, Apple, the government itself, they are accepting people who don't necessarily have a higher education degree, and there is a job scarcity right now. There is a humongous need for labor forces, and the doors are open. You don't need to have a diploma from even a elite university. Any university will do nowadays. Doesn't that seem like the doors and the path is open for practically anyone who wants to take it?
I think that those are such interesting points, and I know that that's what a lot of families are thinking right now is, wouldn't it make more sense to have, to go straight into the workforce? There are some jobs, there are opportunities. Why waste the money and time to go through higher ed? But I think that, what Tim and I write about in our book is that, we really want to support young people in the long game. And that's a very short game kind of mentality, so yes, maybe students can go right into the workforce and do well for a certain amount of time. But really, what we're interested in is helping young people launch into the world in ways that ultimately they can have longer success for a longer time. And one of the things that I think that is needed is for students to really know how to make the best use of that higher ed experience. Just getting a college degree is not going to necessarily going to help them to maximize the opportunity. Students need to learn how to really use the time well there. How would they build their social capital and their brand capital, what we call their human capital? And in our book, we really talk about how to make the most use of your college experience so that you can have the resources, the ties, the experiences to really be successful in the long game.
Okay, so let's go into the topic of, first of all, how do you guys decided to work together? How did you meet? How did you decide to get together? And then let's talk about some of the subjects you are covering in the book, how to make the best of your college life and then catapult that forward into your career.
Well, I can first tackle the question about how did we meet, and then maybe Tim can tackle the second one. So I was researching Tim's school at a number of years ago. Maybe this was 6 or 7 years ago. Tim was working as a high school guidance counselor at a fairly diverse school. And my colleague, Nancy Hill, who is a Harvard professor, and I were doing research for his school around what were some of the ways in which students were struggling, and how could we help them. And one of the questions that we asked students in our interviews was, who's the most important adult here? Who has the greatest influence on you and your purpose moving forward? And over again, we heard Mr. Klein, Mr. Klein, from these students who were from all different walks of life and racial backgrounds. They were all like, Mr. Klein. And so I was like, I need to meet Mr. Klein. And then the rest is history. Tim was doing work on the ground that was really having remarkable results. So even before, we started doing research explicitly on purpose, Tim was really implementing purpose interventions in his work with students. And it was having such an impact that students were 30% more likely to go to four-year colleges after having worked with him. And so, it's just been an amazing experience for me to be able to work with a clinician, somebody who has such an effective practice with young people and launching them into their careers and into their positive futures.
Okay, well, amazing. I wish you were my teacher, Tim.
That's right.
And just to bring you, so like, Elaine, I think you're bringing in this like great point of, you're kind of making this point that like there are more opportunities and resources available to people than ever before. And thanks to internet and technology, people have more access to opportunities than they had before. So what role does college play, right? And so for you, we could say like, let's just hypothetically think that you are looking for a new job. And I'm like, you should go do this certificate at Google and learn about cloud computing, right? You're going to make $100,000 if you do that. That seems very, very rational to do. But in your head, you're like, is that something I want to do? Can I use my strengths there? Can I be building skills? So it's not just about what's going to make me the most money, but what's going to feel personally meaningful. Am I going to be able to contribute to the world beyond the self, right? And so the challenge isn't getting people more information about resources available. The real challenge is helping people understand what's personally meaningful to them. What are their core values? What do they care about first? What contribution do they make? How do they want to grow as people? And then it's like helping them to discover those really big elements of purpose. And then it's saying, okay, what are the opportunities available to you where you could actually use these strengths? You could gain these new skills. You could make this positive impact. Because you could go do a cloud computing certificate for Google, but you might hate coding, or you might hate data management, or like attention to detail. And so I think the role that higher education play, and we have a lot of criticism for higher education in our book, but I think our role is saying, the hard work is actually helping people to understand what their sense of purpose is. But once they can actually do that, you can use that as a decision-making framework to go out and take advantage to opportunities that really are going to be intrinsically motivating to you. And so that's kind of where we say, like, young people, adults, people transitioning out of their careers need more space and opportunity to do this work about what really cares, what is important to me, what do I want to do, and then how can I actually pursue that in life. And I learned all of that stuff from Belle's research, because that is what her research is on. And the critical part is that when people are pursuing things that are purposeful to them, they've connected what they really care about to what they're doing in the world. They're more successful, they have better mental health, they're more resilient. Like Belle's research has found that when purpose is the silver bullet that makes people successful and happy in their lives. And that's why we wrote the book. And that's kind of the message we're trying to send.
Yes, Tim, but I mean, there is the purpose and the passion and the things you would like to do in life, but then there is the market signals. Like if I have a career, let's say on Greek mythology, I don't know how many people will give me a job on Greek mythology, and I could even do a PhD on that. In fact, I know a person who have a PhD in Greece, I guess Latin or Greek literature, and that person struggles to make, so although the purpose of life is there met, the economic reality is telling otherwise. So this person finds herself often having to compromise on where am I going to get my next job. She told me there are only 20 employers in the whole Canada who could give her a job as a professor in Greek literature.
Uh-huh. I can, well, I'll jump in and then I want to hear from Belle, but just like this. Yeah. So, okay. Our entire book is about helping people say, what are the strengths, skills you want to develop, impact you want to make, core values you want to live by. And then the rest of it is showing, here's how, if you actually just pursue these things for their own sake, here's the market demand, here's where they fit, here's how you could actually pursue this critically in your career to be actually successful. Because the irony here is, we hear it all the time. That is a great example. If you get this like very specialized liberal arts PhD in Greek mythology, like you're going to be this broke historian or poet on the street, right? But if I was talking to her, I'd be like, well, what are the skills she had to use to get that? You know, did she have to be a critical thinker? Did she have to analyze complex tasks? Did she actually have to synthesize information and be able to like repurpose it so people could understand it, right? Did she have to collaborate and communicate with the team? Did she have to be incredibly organized and have attention to detail and time management? So yes, she's in this because of higher education, she's in a very niche field where that specific thing isn't like, there aren't a lot of opportunities. But if she was to expand her vision to say, what are the strengths that I was using? What is the process of learning that I love most? Those skills that I just mentioned, critical thinking, analytical thinking, attention to detail, those are the most transferable, in demand, and enduring skills on the market right now. So if she was willing to go out of that very special niche, she has wildly in demand skills that
Yes.
you actually learn from liberal arts. Belle, did you want to add to
I
that?
just, we hear all the time that, students seem very confused about this dichotomy between purpose and what's practical. They feel like they have to choose one or the other. And for all the reasons that you just intimated, Alan, and yet at the same time, like I read your story, about how you journeyed from, was it 20 years working as a custodian to what you're doing now? And I think you have been on an incredible purpose journey that is now very, very, it's practically working for you. It is working for you. You're able to do the work that you are loving. And, I would say, like, from your story, I can see all these elements of what we talk about in our book, really, which is, helping young people to explore various things that are sometimes not necessarily always every single thing is practical or making them money. But they are having opportunities that span a wide range of areas that enable them to begin to connect with the things that are their strengths, their skills that they're motivated to master.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that if you weren't so pumped about doing the things that you do, it would be hard for you to be as successful as you are today.
Well,
Right?
let's put it to the test. Can I ask you a question, Alan, about
Sure.
this? So I'm wondering, think about your 20 years as a custodian. Are there any skills or strengths? Is there anything from that experience that you learned that you're taking, that you're applying in all the different things that you are doing now?
Uh, well, well, my story is quite weird. Okay, so when I was a kid, I was a drug dealer. So I went to prison and I educated myself in prison in a way. I came to Canada as an immigrant. I worked as a janitor and I worked my way up to a series of things and businesses. I became a self-employed individual or entrepreneur because I couldn't get a job. I have a funny Spanish accent. My accent in French is even worse. So I created a business, and my business succeeded. And it wasn't easy, but I make my own path, and I don't know. There's the desire to succeed. I didn't have role models. Well, my role model was my father, who was also a drug dealer. So it's a very, very circuitous way to the life that I'm living today.
So
There's
why did you? Oh, go ahead, Belle.
Well, I was just going to jump in really quick, Tim, and then I want you to continue your questions. This is great. Because one of the things I saw in your story is just the attitude with which you brought to the work that you were doing. I read one line about, you did the work that you did as a janitor, and you never once complained.
No.
You dived into every opportunity thinking, this is an opportunity. What can I learn from this? I'm going to glean every last drop of experience, opportunity, social capital, connections
Right.
that I can out of it.
Right.
And now you are who you are today. And, it's amazing, the influence, the impact that you're having. And you are motivated by the work that you're doing. It's something that you care about doing.
Yeah.
So anyways, continue.
Well, so why did you decide to take that? Because I felt like the path you took after prison, all that very, very difficult path, not the easy path to take. So like, why did you decide to take that different path from what you had known in the past?
Wow, you do a lot of self-reflection in prison. There's four walls on yourself, and you have to choose whether you would like to, in my case, whether I would like to continue a life of what I saw myself as a loser, being involved in drugs and crime, or be a more respectable human being, and I opted out for being a more respectable human being.
And so, you just bring in like a beautiful point there. So one, we talk about purpose as, as doing something that's personally meaningful to you, but genuinely believing like you are contributing to the world beyond the self, right? Like you are making a positive impact. And like, I feel like you do this work because you really want to give back and you want to help other people, right? And that's not surprising to me because the research actually shows that what we call pro-social intentions, that desire to give back, it comes from adversity a lot of the time. It comes from challenges in life. And what's kind of special about your story is that people who go through a lot of adversity and challenges, when they have the opportunity for self-reflection to make meaning of those experiences in a healthy way, a lot of the times they create this new purpose narrative that is around how can I use my experience to help other people who might be going through the same thing. And it's it's kind of crazy where our whole thing is that people aren't provided the opportunities to do that really, really deep self-reflection. And when they do, they on their own come to purpose like you did. It's unfortunate you needed the prison walls to do it, but it kind of says something about our educational system that there's more opportunities for self-reflection in prison than there is in education right now. But thank you for sharing that story, because you are purpose and you are showing what purpose in action looks like. So, which is stronger than any of what the research can show. So thank you.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk more about the book. So can you tell us how the book is divided, and what can a reader expect to get out of it?
So I think that one of the things from your story is, amazing, is that you figured this out on your own, but it's not common sense at all what your journey was. And so what we are doing in our book is to really try to help break it down for families, for parents, for educators, and for students themselves who are trying to figure out how to pursue their purpose. And so for the first part of the book, we really take each of what we call the elements of purpose one at a time. The parts that are like the parts of purpose, including identifying what character strengths you most delight in about yourself, identifying what are the skills that you're most motivated to master, the values that you are willing to sacrifice for, the value archetype that you are, which we go into more in the book. It's an important aspect of the book. And then we also, then talk about what needs you're motivated to address in the world that you want to contribute to. So these are all, questions that probably students get asked at various times in their life, but they're really hard for students to answer. And we want to scaffold them in how they're able to then zero in on who they really are in terms of these categories. And then the second half of the book is practice oriented. How do you, now that you have identified these elements of purpose about yourself, how do you apply them in all these different contexts, whether it's at home, how do you cultivate it in your relationships at home? How do you cultivate it in school, in higher ed, and ultimately in the workplace and the world beyond?
Can we talk about the first chapter where you speak about the mindset? How do we develop that mindset and that desire to, I don't know, have purpose in life and help others and help yourself?
Yeah. I mean, the first chapter is really asking this really big question about like, what is your life all about? What is the purpose in life? And we really talk about, like, at least in the United States, North America, we've really been told that the story, we tell this hustle, it's hustle culture, it's getting ahead. We've really been told that the story, that the purpose of life is to be successful, right? And we go in and we say, like, I think people think that success is the ultimate goal in life because it feels like we live in this hyper competitive zero-sum game where there are few winners and many losers. And so if you are not working really hard to, outcompete your peers, then you're going to get beat and you're not going to have enough money to survive. And so we've really told, we're really in this world right now where we've told young people that, like, your ultimate goal is to be as successful as possible, make as much money as possible. What's interesting, we're seeing a rejection of that right now in the Great Resignation, and like people aren't going to college, they're questioning college because there's such high levels of mental health crisis and burnout. People are like, what's the point of being successful if I'm just going to be miserable? And so we're seeing people shift to what we call the passion mindset. So they're like, oh, well, the purpose of life just must be to be happy. That's be what I care about. So I'm just going to try to do what I want to do, maximize my positive emotions, don't do anything that causes me negative emotions, and live that way. And what we show is that in the research, the more you put happiness as the central value in life, higher levels of depression and anxiety, the more unhappy you become. Because when you only care about your own emotions, you're only caring about yourself and you're only focused on yourself. And so we picture those as like this scale between purpose or passion and performance. And so then we kind of frame it as purpose is doing something that's personally meaningful to you, but it also contributes to the world beyond the self. So it balances that need for performance, that need for validation in the outside world, with doing something that is personally meaningful, that fills up your own bucket. So that's kind of how we frame the purpose mindset. But really, the story is purpose is living a life that is personally meaningful and also contributes to the world beyond the self, no matter what you're doing.
And do you give kind of frameworks of how we find that balance?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is one of the key parts of what the book does, is really helping students to break it down, young people to break it down, early professionals, and even later professionals, to be able to identify what is personally meaningful, as well as the second part of the definition, which is, how do I wish to make a contribution in the world around me? And, it's not about like, are you making enough of a contribution? There's no value judgments on like what kind of contribution. There's just something about being able to not just focus on oneself, no matter what your background is, whether you come from affluence or you come from, great poverty. When we are looking outside of ourselves and we're trying to have some impact in the world beyond ourselves, for some reason, though, that combination of doing something that's personally meaningful and contributing is associated with all of these positive outcomes for people. It includes psychological health, physical health, even longevity, and ultimately it has great influence on one's career, work, and vocational trajectory and success.
Yeah, for your listeners, I mean, really, to break down what purpose is, it's like asking yourself, so whatever, if it's your job, if it's home, whatever, purpose is, am I using my strengths? Am I gaining new skills? And am I making a positive contribution in a way that aligns with my core values. And you really use that as this decision-making framework to figure out if you're headed in a direction where you can use those strengths. You feel like you are learning and growing and getting better. You feel like what you're doing matters to the world beyond the self, and you're doing it in a way that's aligned with your core values. The challenge is you have to know what the strengths are that make you your best self. You have to know what skills you want to be developing. You have to know what contribution you want to make, and you have to know your core values. And so the rest of the book is taking each of those individual elements and breaking it down and helping people to identify what are the strengths, what are the skills, what is the impact, what are the core values, to really give people that shared language so that they can actually articulate these very personalized internal elements of purpose and be able to articulate them so that they can be more intentional in designing their life in a way where they can actually be pursuing them.
So just to double down a little bit on what Tim is saying, one of the biggest things that I think people struggle with, not just students, is making big decisions in life, whether it's a decision about whether they should be involved in certain extracurricular activities, or whether they should choose a certain major, a certain college, a career direction, a first job, a later job. How do we know whether or not this opportunity is, what we should be doing, what we want to be doing? And so we really frame purpose as a decision-making framework. And so what Tim just described are the compass points of a compass, and they can provide a framework, or they can provide a measure for how to determine whether or not the direction you're going is aligned with your purpose.
One of your chapters is trying to define people's archetype. I wonder if I have a hard time understanding people who don't have the same mentality as I do. And I think your chapter helps a lot on how to understand and how we are all different and we don't have the same motivations or goals. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about those archetypes.
Yeah, so that's about core values, right? And I think we talk a lot about core values in organizational. We put core values up on our websites. Everyone's like, this is what we value. But really, you can only know what you value, but what you intentionally choose not to value. And so there are these two spectrums of core values, which is based on the research from Shalom Schwartz from Israel University. And there's two spectrums of values. So one is, are you more individualistic or are you collectivist? And what that means is basically, do you believe when I win, we win? Meaning the better you do as an individual, that's going to help your community thrive. So you're going to focus on your own individual efforts. Or do you believe when we win, I win? Meaning the better my group or my community does, the better I'm going to do. So do you put your own individual needs first for the betterment of the group? Or do you put the group first for the betterment of everyone? That is, we have no value judgment on that. But you're going to see, we're in the United States, overwhelmingly individualistic culture. If you go on East, they're more collectivist, but everyone is on this spectrum of individual to collectivism. And then there's this other spectrum on the y-axis of growth versus stability. Some people value growth, some people value stability. And so what that means is, do you think change is an opportunity to make things better? Or in general, do you feel like change is a threat to make things worse? And every one of us is somewhere on those continuums right there about their relationship with change, depending on their own lived experiences and their community values. And so our value archetypes is helping people to understand if you're individual or collectivist, are you growth oriented or stability oriented? And then what does that mean for the type of organization you want to be working for, the type of work you want, the role that you want? But really what we're finding is a lot of time there's any conflict with anyone and anything, it's really around these core values, because the more individualistic you are, the more collectivist values are going to conflict with you. The more you are an entrepreneur, trailblazer, and you want to change everything, you're going to have people who are all about, preservation, conservation, who are going to be, their values are going to be violated by that. So it's really helping understand people's values and where they can join communities that align with those values.
Wow. I have a big question. I grew up in poverty. I had a lot of needs, and I grew up trying as an individualistic person, trying to get the most benefit for myself, me, myself, and I. Now I find myself in a different situation and I try to be more community oriented, but I have a hard time making that switch. It's a constant effort every day. Okay, how do I think less of myself and what's the most convenient thing for me? And how can I help more my community? And I think many people have that transition in life as they get older, as they become wealthier or their life situation improve. They would like to see how they can better help their community. So can you help me out on that one?
You really bring up such a great point, which is that our value archetypes are influenced by our situations and the environments that we're in. And so Tim and I right now have been developing a validated measure so that people who want to take this quiz can identify not only what their current value archetype is, but what they aspire towards. Like you said, you've been me, myself, and I, very individualist, and now you've moved to aspiring to be more about community, right? More collectivist. And then there's a third part that you hinted at, which is that our environment can really have an influence. And so a part of our one of the subscales of our quiz is about tapping into what is the environment telling us to be like. Are we like all about being collectivistic, but our environment is saying you're going to be more successful if you are individualistic. And here, again, it's not about value judgments on you're a better person if you're individualistic or collectivistic. We just all have our priorities and our leanings based on lots of different things, temperament based on our families of origin, what we've had to do for survival, our cultural values, and so on. But it can be very helpful for us to understand what those value archetypes are, because when we are experiencing a big mismatch between what we care about and how we roll, what our work style is, and what the environment is privileging or trying to reward, then we can feel out of sync with our environment. And this is where, the book really is for corporate settings too, and in management and leaders, to understand how do you identify the work approaches, the value archetypes of your people, so that you can help those people to feel as though they belong, to experience a sense of purpose, to be able to work at their best. And ultimately, that affects the bottom line. That affects whether or not you're going to retain those people in your workplace, if you're valuing them, if you're understanding how to allow them to best use their value archetype.
Okay, so we are really running out of time. Can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners connect with you?
Yeah, it's called How to Navigate Life, the New Science of Finding Your Way in School, Career, and Beyond. And then howtonavigate.com is where you can find us and a whole bunch of additional resources, our validated assessments, and the work we do. And this was such a fun conversation. And so we're so thankful for having us on. And thank you for the work that you're doing, because you are absolutely living